Hey, you made it. Welcome to NeuroNightmares. These are 7 true stories that'll stay with you long after the rain stops. If you haven't already, hit subscribe. It's better to have someone with you when the night gets quiet. I used to believe that hospitals were the safest places in the world. Clean, sterile, full of order, rules, routines, machines that beep when something's wrong. But that was before I spent 6 years working the graveyard shift at Maple Grove Medical. It was a small hospital tucked into a quiet Minnesota town, where time seemed to slow down after dusk. We didn't get much action overnight. Maybe a call light here and there, sometimes a restless patient wandering the halls. But for the most part, the place felt forgotten. At first, I loved it. I liked being alone. I liked that everything had a rhythm, that the world outside went dark and quiet, and for a few hours, it was just me and the hum of fluorescent lights. But then something changed, and I can't ever unsee it. It started in the West Wing, a part of the hospital that was sealed off years before I got there. There had been a water pipe burst after a heavy snow melt, and the wing flooded. Mold spread fast. The hospital didn't have the money to fix it, so they just locked the whole section and moved on. We didn't go in. We didn't talk about it. It was just a hallway you passed by. Dead space. Until one night, I was walking the 2 a.m. round. I'd done it 100 times before. Check vitals, adjust drips, make notes. My mind was already halfway to the break room. Then I saw it. Light. A faint line of yellow stretching from beneath the double doors to the west wing. I stopped. For a moment, I just stared at it, tried to make sense of what I was seeing. The lights in that wing hadn't worked for years. I'd been told the electricity was cut to prevent fires. I stepped closer. The hallway around me felt still, like even the air was waiting. I touched the door. It was cold and locked. Then I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't loud. It was steady, methodical, like someone gently knocking, but not to come in, to be let out. I stepped back, suddenly aware of how alone I was. My stomach twisted. I didn't run. I just turned and walked, maybe a little too fast, straight to the front desk. I sat there for the next hour trying to convince myself it was nothing. Just a trick of the light. A loose bulb. Pipes. Rats. Anything that made sense. The next night, I passed by again. Nothing. 2 nights after that. Same thing. Dark. Silent. So I let it go. I wanted to let it go. But then 2 weeks later, it happened again. Same light. Same hour. Same tapping. This time I brought my phone. Not to film. Just to use the flashlight. I crept closer, heart pounding in my ears. I held my breath as I looked through the narrow glass pane set in the door. That's when I saw it. At the far end of the hallway, past the debris and the old wheelchairs, stacked like broken bones. A window. Room 327. And in that window, a figure. Tall. Thin. Still. I stared. It didn't move. Didn't sway. Didn't acknowledge me. But it was there. I stepped back. Slowly. Phone still in my hand. My thumb hovered over the call button, though I couldn't have told you who I planned to call. Security wouldn't believe me. None of the other nurses had seen anything, but I knew what I saw. And the worst part, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next few nights, I avoided that hallway completely. I rerouted my rounds, took the longer paths, invented excuses, but I couldn't sleep. Even at home, I kept seeing it. That shape, that stillness. I started having dreams, standing in the hallway, staring into that window. Except in the dreams, it wasn't standing still. It was moving, slowly, toward the door. One night, I stayed late. Everyone else had gone. The hospital felt emptier than usual. It was just me and the hum of the vending machines. I don't know why I did it, but I walked back, to the west wing. The light was on again. The tapping was louder this time. I reached out, not thinking, and pushed the door. It opened. It shouldn't have. I stepped inside. The air was thick, not dusty exactly, but wrong. Stale in a way that didn't match the rest of the building. The lights above flickered weakly. I moved down the hall. The tapping had stopped, but the door to room 327 was wide open. I froze in the doorway. The room was empty. Just an old bed frame, cracked tiles, a stained ceiling, and the window, closed now. I stepped inside. I shouldn't have, but I did. I looked at the glass. There were marks, smears, like hands had been pressed hard against the inside. Not one set, many, some too high, some too low. I turned and left. I didn't run, but I didn't look back. When I got to the nurse's station, I wrote the report. I called security. They did a full sweep. Nothing. No signs of entry. No footprints. The next day, maintenance checked the locks. They were all still engaged. The cameras in that hallway, not working. No one could explain it. No one wanted to. They stopped responding when I brought it up. So I stopped talking. But I started watching. Every night. Same time. Same hallway. Sometimes the light's there. Sometimes it's not. But every few weeks, I see the shape again. In the window. Motionless. Waiting. And every time I blink, it feels a little closer. I've always found peace in being alone. Not the kind of loneliness that eats at people. No, I chose solitude. I hiked to escape noise. To remember that I was part of something older than buildings. Older than bills and email and endless conversations that never go anywhere. That fall, I decided to take a week for myself. Just me, my pack, and the trails that cut through the northern Cascades. It wasn't the first time I'd gone out there alone, but I'd never gone that far off-grid. No signal, no map markers beyond the worn forestry trails. I'd planned to sleep under the stars, carry only what I needed, and let the days stretch out like a slow exhale. But on the fourth night, the storm caught me. It didn't roll in slowly. It came out of nowhere. One moment the air was crisp and dry, and the next, thunder cracked like the sky was tearing open. The rain was so heavy I couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead. I tried to find some kind of shelter or anything. That's when I saw it through the trees. A cabin. I didn't even question it. I ran toward it like it was calling me. The door creaked open on the first push. The inside was rough, just a single room for walls, a table with a broken leg, and a fireplace filled with crumbling ash. It looked abandoned, but it was dry. I dropped my soaked pack, stripped off the worst of my wet clothes, and laid my sleeping bag near the hearth. I even laughed. I thought I'd stumbled onto some hidden luck. The kind of luck people never believe when you tell the story later. But that wasn't the story I'd end up telling. I was asleep for maybe 2 hours when something woke me. At first, I couldn't place what it was. The rain had softened, and there was just this hush, like the whole forest was holding its breath. Then I heard it, a whisper, not outside, inside. It wasn't words, not really, just breath moving in a way breath shouldn't. At first, I thought maybe the wind was playing tricks through cracks in the wood, but then I realized it was coming from a wall, the far wall, where the boards bowed inward slightly. I held still. I didn't make a sound. The whispering stopped. I sat up slowly, my eyes adjusting to the dark. I thought about turning on my flashlight, but something inside me, something old, something instinctive, told me not to. Instead, I waited. Minutes passed, maybe more. I must have fallen asleep again, because when I opened my eyes, there were footprints by my sleeping bag. Fresh, wet, muddy, and not mine. They circled me, stopped at my head, and led back toward the door, which was still closed. I stood up too fast and felt dizzy. My first thought was that someone had come in, maybe a hunter or a lost camper. But the tracks weren't full boots. They were bare feet, wide, narrow toes, the kind of prints that don't match anyone walking around in the October woods. My heart was hammering, but I couldn't hear anything except my own breathing. Then I noticed something else. The whispering wasn't gone. It had moved. Now it was coming from inside the fireplace. I froze. I didn't want to look, but I did. I knelt down and peered into the hearth. Nothing. Just ash. Old stone. But then I saw the scratches, carved into the brick in the back. Deep gouges, crude symbols, and letters. A single sentence, repeating again and again. He comes when the storm hides the road. I backed away, slowly, I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I just sat upright, gripping my pack, waiting for dawn. And when the first gray light crept through the gaps in the wallboards, I didn't waste a second. I was out the door, boots soaked again, lungs burning in the cold. I didn't stop until I found the main trail. I walked the rest of the day without food, without breaks. But here's the part I've never told anyone. I marked the cabin's location, logged the coordinates on my phone the moment I got a signal again. A few weeks later, when I couldn't shake the memory, I looked it up, asked around in hiker forums, even posted anonymously, and someone messaged me back, said the cabin's been there since the 1950s, but it burned down in 1973. No roof left, no walls. I told them they were wrong. They sent me photos. All that's left is a stone foundation, choked with weeds. I don't know where I spent that night. I don't know whose footprints were in the mud, but I do know this. Somewhere deep in those woods, there's a place that only shows itself when the weather turns, when the trees close in, and if you find it, you won't be alone, no matter how quiet it seems. The nights were the hardest. Everyone tells you grief comes in waves, but nobody tells you that nights make the tide rise faster. The quiet, the stillness, it gives your thoughts room to crawl into places they shouldn't. After Mark died, I thought I'd fall apart immediately, but I didn't. I couldn't, because our daughter still needed me. Ellie had just turned 6 months when the accident happened. A left turn that wasn't his fault. A stranger who ran a red light and took everything from us in one heartbeat. He'd kissed her that morning before leaving. I watched from the kitchen while he whispered something into her little ear and made her giggle. That was the last sound I heard from him, her laughter mixing with his voice as the door closed behind him. After the funeral, I moved her crib into my room. I told myself it was temporary, that I just needed her close, that maybe, if she was near, I'd sleep better. But I didn't sleep. I watched her more than I should have. Every twitch, every breath. I became obsessed with keeping her safe, as if losing her father had somehow made the world more dangerous for her too. 2 weeks after the funeral, I started using the baby monitor again, just to make sure I could hear her when I went downstairs during the day. One of those digital monitors with video and two-way audio. And on a Tuesday night, just past midnight, I heard it. I'd gone down to heat up some tea. It was cold and quiet, and I left the monitor on the counter next to me. Ellie had been fussing earlier, and I expected to hear her cry again. Instead, I heard a man's voice. Soft, calm, familiar. Shoo, it's okay, little bear. Daddy's here. My chest locked. I froze mid-step and stared at the monitor. I could see her on the screen, lying still, eyes open, looking past the camera towards something I couldn't see. The voice kept talking, reassuring, warm. Go to sleep now. Daddy's watching. I ran upstairs, slammed the door open. She was alone. Just Ellie, lying there peacefully, blinking at the ceiling. The room was still, silent. I checked the closet, under the crib. Every window was locked. I told myself it was interference. Some stranger on a nearby frequency. It had to be. The next night, it happened again. Same voice, same message. But this time, it said my name. Anna, she's fine. Just rest. I yanked the monitor from the wall and shut it off. I didn't sleep at all. The next day, I called the company that made the monitor. I asked if it was possible for another signal to bleed into mine. The woman on the phone hesitated, said maybe, if someone had the same model nearby. But I lived in a detached house. Our closest neighbor was half a football field away. That night, I didn't turn the monitor on, and Ellie screamed. I hadn't heard her cry like that in months. It wasn't hunger. It wasn't pain. It was fear. I ran in and picked her up, held her until she calmed. I stayed with her until sunrise, and then I did what I promised myself I wouldn't. I turned the monitor back on, not because I believed it was Mark, but because, for reasons I couldn't explain, Ellie slept better when it was on, and I couldn't ignore that. A few nights passed. I heard the voice again, always after midnight, always low and careful. He sang lullabies I hadn't heard in years, told her stories from his childhood, joked about her chubby cheeks, And sometimes, I cried listening to it. I wanted to believe. But then things changed. One night, I heard her stir and whimper, and I heard the voice again. But it wasn't soothing. It was firm. "Ellie, sleep. Now." I sat up straight. My skin tightened. She whimpered again, and the voice snapped. I said, "Go to sleep." I ran into the room. She was sitting up in her crib, her face red from crying, reaching out toward the wall. No one was there. I turned the monitor off. That morning, I packed it away. But Ellie stopped sleeping again. She cried for hours. Nothing helped. And in the middle of her sobs, she said a word she'd never spoken before. "Dada." I tried to brush it off. Babies babble, I told myself. She doesn't know what she's saying. But then she pointed to the corner of the room, smiled, and said it again. I left the house that afternoon. We stayed with my sister for a few days. No monitors, no voices. Ellie calmed. I convinced myself it had all been in my head, a byproduct of grief, of sleepless nights, of hoping for something that could never be real. But when I returned, I found the monitor on the kitchen table, still plugged in, still on. I know I didn't leave it that way. I checked the footage. The monitor saves the last 12 hours automatically. Most of it was quiet, just Ellie sleeping, until 3:12 a.m. There's a moment where the screen glitches slightly, and then the camera tilts, like someone moved it. And from off-screen, the voice speaks. Not a whisper, not a lullaby. It's angry, controlled. "You left. You took her away. She's mine too." I watched, my whole body shaking. The last thing it said before the screen went black: "If you come between us again, you won't like what happens next." I burned it. The monitor, the footage, everything. And I moved. New house, new baby room. No cameras, no audio monitors. But sometimes, when the house is quiet, when the night stretches too long, I hear her in the dark, giggling, and sometimes talking, not to me, to someone else. And I tell myself it's nothing, just imagination, just dreams. But there are nights, only once or twice, where I swear I hear that voice again. Not through a speaker, not through a wall, just behind me. It started with a delay. I was brushing my teeth, half asleep, staring into the mirror like I always did. That's when I noticed it, barely half a second. But it was enough. My reflection blinked after I did. I stopped brushing and leaned in. Nothing looked off. It was me, messy bun, dark circles, oversized hoodie, same tired eyes. But I was sure the blink was late. I told myself I was just tired. I was going to bed too late. Finals were around the corner, and my brain was wired with caffeine and stress. Still, something felt wrong. That night, I barely slept. A few days passed. I tried to forget about it. But then, I caught it happening again. This time, I wasn't even doing anything complicated, just turning my head. And in the mirror, I turned slower. Not by much, but enough that it looked off. Enough that my stomach dropped. Again, I blamed my eyes. Lighting. Nerves. But I started avoiding mirrors. I stopped fixing my hair in the bathroom. I used my phone camera to do makeup, just to avoid looking too long at my own reflection. It felt ridiculous, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right when I looked at myself. Then came the smile. I was washing my hands, trying not to meet my own gaze, when I saw it, out of the corner of my eye. It smiled. Not me. I wasn't smiling. Not even a little. I was frowning, lost in thought. But in the mirror, my mouth curled up slowly. The smile wasn't big, just enough to send my pulse racing. And then, when I stared at it, it went back to normal, like it hadn't happened, like it hadn't just smirked while I stood there frozen. I backed out of the bathroom and shut the door. That night, I told my mom I was getting sick. I just wanted to stay home, sleep, maybe reset my brain. She didn't ask questions, but I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed with the door locked, trying to read, trying to watch shows I used to love. But every screen felt like it was watching me back. That weekend, I covered my mirror with a blanket, the full-length one on my closet door. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I didn't care. And for a while it worked. Until Monday night. I was getting ready for bed. I'd taken a shower, and steam had fogged up the bathroom mirror. I wiped it clean, just a quick swipe, and immediately wished I hadn't, because I was standing still. But my reflection wasn't. It tilted its head, like a question. I didn't move. Neither did it, for a moment. Then it raised its hand, slowly, and pressed its palm to the glass. I stumbled back, knocking into the sink, and my reflection didn't copy me. It just stared, watching, smiling again, not wide, not cartoonish, but sure, like it knew something I didn't. I screamed for my mom. She ran in, alarmed, dripping from the dishes she'd been washing. I pointed to the mirror, but of course, by then, it was normal. My reflection looked just as terrified as I felt. She said I was overtired. That stress does strange things to the brain, and I nodded, because what else could I say? But that wasn't the worst of it. That night, after everyone was asleep, I woke up to the sound of glass tapping. At first I thought it was from outside, maybe wind, but it was rhythmic. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2. I looked toward the closet, the one with the covered mirror. The blanket had fallen. I don't know how. I taped it. I tucked it tight, but it was gone. And the mirror, the reflection was empty. There was no one in it. I stood up slowly, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my throat. Still no reflection. Then, she stepped in. I can't describe it. She looked like me, but wrong. Skin too smooth, eyes too wide, movements too fluid, like she was trying to remember how I moved. She smiled, the same smile I'd seen before, and then she mouthed something. I couldn't hear it, but I know what it was. Let me in. I backed up until I hit the wall. My lamp flickered. My legs trembled so hard I could barely stay standing. Then she raised her hand again, just like in the bathroom, and placed it on the inside of the glass. And then she started pressing, not touching, pushing, like the mirror was bending, like it was thinning. I ran out of the room and didn't stop until I was outside, barefoot, crying under the porch light. My mom found me 10 minutes later. I couldn't speak, just kept pointing behind me. We replaced the mirror the next day. I told her it was cracked. I don't think she believed me, but she didn't argue. I haven't looked into a real mirror since. Not once. I use tinted windows, fog glass, nothing reflective, not fully. And I never look at both eyes at the same time. Never give it time to react. Because if I ever see her again, if she ever shows up in the mirror, smiling like that, I don't think she's going to wait behind the glass anymore. And if that day comes, I'm not sure I'll be the one on this side when it's over. I used to think I was the only one who paid attention on the night bus. Most people stare at their phones, or sink into their hoods, or close their eyes and pretend they're already home. But I've always been a watcher. Maybe it's the long shifts. Maybe it's the silence that creeps in after 2 a.m. Either way, I notice things other people missed, which is probably why I noticed him first. I can't say exactly when it started. I'd like to pin it to one night, one stop, one moment. But the truth is, he just started being there, like he'd always been there. He was never remarkable. Middle-aged, gray coat, dark hat, no bag, clean-shaven, the kind of man you forget as soon as you look away. And yet, I started to recognize him. He was on the bus when I got on after my shift at the hospital. Always. Different seat each time. Sometimes near the front. Sometimes in the middle. Occasionally in the very back. But always there. And always watching. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I'd glance up, catch him looking, and when I blinked, he was looking somewhere else. That happened maybe 5 or 6 times before I decided to test it. One Tuesday, I sat in the middle, watched the front entrance like a hawk. I made a note of every single passenger who stepped on, counted them, no one matching him. But halfway through the ride, I looked up, and he was sitting at the back, 2 rows behind me. I stared at him, really stared, tried to take in every detail, his posture, the tired crease under his eyes, the worn texture of his gloves. I thought maybe I'd seen him somewhere before. A patient, a visitor, someone I passed in the hallway. But nothing clicked. He never spoke. Not to the driver, not to anyone. He never got off at a stop, and I never saw him bored. Just there, like a permanent fixture of Route 62. I started switching buses, changing my schedule, leaving earlier or later, just to prove to myself it wasn't anything weird, that I could make it stop. But it didn't stop. No matter which night I worked, no matter which bus I took, he was there, sometimes closer than before. The worst part, I stopped seeing other people after a while. Not entirely. There were still the regulars, sure, but most nights it was just me, the driver, and him. I'd feel his eyes even when I wasn't looking, a weight between my shoulder blades, a sense that if I turned around, he'd be watching, not angry, not smiling, just waiting. One night, I decided I'd had enough. I waited until we reached the last stop downtown, where everyone usually cleared out before the bus looped back. I stayed in my seat. He didn't move. I turned to the driver and said, "Hey, that guy in the gray coat. He doesn't ever get off, does he?" The driver looked confused. "What guy?" I pointed. "Back row." He glanced in the mirror. "You're the only one left." I looked again. The seat was empty. My blood went cold. I laughed it off. "Oh, weird. Must have fallen asleep on me." The driver gave me a look, but said nothing. I got off at my stop and walked faster than usual. I kept checking behind me, half expecting to see a shadow following, but there was nothing. Still, I didn't sleep well. The next night, he was back, front row this time, sitting just behind the driver, and when I stepped onto the bus, he looked straight at me. That was new. His expression didn't change. He didn't blink, but something about the stare felt sharper than before. Focused. Intentional. I took a seat far from him, kept my eyes on the passing lights. I thought, what does he want? But then a better question crept in. What if he's not after me? What if I'm the one moving closer to him? That thought stayed with me for days. One Thursday night, it finally escalated. I'd taken a different route, a longer one. I sat in the very back, thinking I could get ahead of him, force him to take the front, make it obvious. Halfway through the ride, I realized he wasn't on the bus. I actually sighed with relief, leaned back, closed my eyes. Then I heard breathing, right behind me, not next to me, not across, directly behind. There's no seat behind the last row, just a metal panel. I turned around slowly, and there he was, standing, gray coat, hat, same face, closer than ever. I couldn't speak, couldn't scream. He leaned down, inches from my ear, and said, "You finally noticed." That's all. Then he turned and walked to the middle of the bus, and vanished. Not out the door, not behind a seat. He just wasn't there anymore. The driver didn't react. No one else was there to see it. I got off at the next stop and walked the rest of the way home, even though it was raining. Since then, I've started walking to and from work. I haven't stepped on a bus in months. But sometimes, late at night, when I pass the depot on foot, I see a gray-coated figure sitting on the last parked bus, motionless, watching me walk by. And sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I'd let him sit next to me. Or worse, if I'd answered him when he whispered, because I still hear it in the back of my head when the world gets too quiet. You finally noticed. There's something quiet about grief that no one warns you about. It's not always loud sobs or breaking down in public. Sometimes it's the silence, the kind that sits in your chest like wet cement. My sister, Lena, was the loudest part of my life. Not obnoxiously. She just filled rooms. She laughed too hard at her own jokes, played music on speaker no matter where we were, and always texted in all caps when she was excited. And when she died, the world didn't feel quiet. It felt empty. I was the one who had to decide what went into the casket. I remember the funeral director handing me a clipboard like it was normal. I stood over her things, numb, trying to choose what pieces of her would stay with her forever. I placed in a photo, one of us from when we were kids at the beach, her favorite necklace, and her phone. I don't know why I did that. Maybe because it never left her hand. Maybe because I didn't want her to be alone. Maybe because I couldn't bear to see her number pop up on my contacts, untouched. She was gone, and I was trying to move forward. 3 months passed, then 4, and then came the call. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was driving home. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. No name, just unknown caller. I didn't answer, but then it buzzed again. Same number. Still, I let it go. But as I turned onto my street, something made me glance at the screen. And I swear to God, it said Lena. I almost drove off the road. I pulled over, heart slamming in my ribs. I stared at the screen, hands shaking. The call ended. Voicemail. But there was no voicemail. Nothing recorded. Just silence. I told myself it was a glitch. Some leftover SIM registration. Or someone reusing the number. Except I'd had that number retired. I'd called the carrier myself, the week after the funeral. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, the calls started again. Always from unknown. But they came at the same time she used to call. Early morning, or late at night, when she couldn't sleep. The time she knew I'd pick up, even if I was half asleep. Once I picked up, just to end it. But there was nothing. No voice. No breathing. Just dead air. Until I said her name. Lena. The call ended. I didn't get another one for a week. I tried to ignore it. I didn't tell anyone. What could I say? My dead sister's phone is calling me. Then came the worst part. I visited the cemetery. It was a Friday evening. Cloudy, cold, wind pushing at my back. I brought fresh flowers. I hadn't been in a while. Her headstone looked smaller than I remembered. I sat beside it, talked to her for a bit, told her about work, about Mom, about how I kept hearing her laugh in my dreams. Then, I heard it. Faint, far off, familiar. Her ringtone, the one she used for years, that awful pop song she refused to change. I froze. It came again, not from a distance, not from a car, from beneath me, from the soil. I stood up dizzy. I walked around the grave, thinking maybe someone was nearby. A prank, a speaker, a Bluetooth bug. But it wasn't coming from around me. It was below. 3 rings. Then silence. I backed away. My knees went weak. I left the flowers. I got in my car and didn't look back. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. I called the cemetery office, asked if there was any construction, any soil disturbances, anything. They said no. Nothing touched. I asked quietly if they ever exhumed caskets. They told me that required legal permission, court orders. I didn't have it in me to ask. The next week, it got worse. The calls changed. Now, it wasn't just her name. Now, it was my number calling me. Every missed call in my log showed my own number. I blocked it. It still came through. I changed numbers. A few days of peace. Then it started again. Same ringtone. Same times. I was losing my mind. I knew it. I was grieving too hard, letting the memories turn into delusions. That's what I told myself. But then one night I answered, and this time there was a voice. Faint, garbled, but hers. Not saying full sentences, just fragments. Cold can't please. I started crying. Lena, where are you? No answer, just static. Then, why did you leave me? The call dropped. I screamed into the dark. I went back to the cemetery the next morning. I brought a shovel. I don't know what I thought I was going to do. Dig down 6 feet on my own. But I needed answers. I stared at the grave. Then I dropped the shovel. I collapsed to my knees and started sobbing into the dirt. I didn't leave you. I didn't. And then, my phone buzzed. No caller ID. I answered, and all I heard was, goodbye. Click. The call stopped after that. It's been months now. But sometimes, at night, I keep the phone close. Not because I want her to call, but because part of me still believes she might. I don't know what was real and what wasn't. I don't know if grief can trick the mind that deeply. But I know what I heard. And if she was reaching out, I hope she found peace. Because I'm still trying to. When I was 11, I started waking up at the same time every single night, 2:03 a.m. Not 2 o'clock, not 2:05, always 2:03, like an alarm had been set in my brain. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I figured maybe I just had to pee or my body was adjusting to something weird. But the more it happened, the more I started to expect it. And then I noticed something. Every time I woke up at 2:03, I would glance at my window, and someone was standing in the backyard. Not moving, just standing. We lived on the edge of town, where the neighborhoods backed up into forest. Our backyard wasn't fenced, just a wide open patch of grass that faded into tree line. So I couldn't make out a face or any real features. Just a figure, tall, thin, still. At first I thought it was my imagination, or maybe a tree, a post. I told my dad. He said it was probably a neighbor walking their dog, or maybe just shadows playing tricks on me. I tried to believe him, but I knew it wasn't a shadow, because every night the figure was in the same exact place, same time, same posture, staring up at my window. After the fourth or fifth time, I stopped telling my parents. They didn't believe me. They said I needed to stop watching scary movies, that I was psyching myself out. But I wasn't. So I started staying up, lying in bed with my eyes open, waiting. At exactly 2:03 a.m., like clockwork, I glanced at the window, and there he was, just standing, looking up. I never saw his face. He was always in shadow, but I felt the stare. One night I got brave, or stupid. I stood up, went to the window, and pulled the curtain aside fully. He didn't move. He just stood there, like he had all the time in the world. I waved. Nothing. I wanted to scream, but I didn't want to wake my parents again. They already thought I was imagining things. So I picked up the only weapon I had, my old camcorder. I figured if I could film it, show them, they'd finally see what I saw. So the next night, I set it up. A cheap tripod. Pointed it right at the window. I clicked record at 1:50 a.m. and left it running. I lay in bed, pretending to sleep. But at 2:03, I turned my head. He was there. Same spot. Same stare. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just waited for the sun. When morning came, the figure was gone. I ran to the camcorder. I fast-forwarded the footage, skipping through the early hour. And then there it was, 2:02, 2:03, and the figure appeared. A dark silhouette, far back in the yard, motionless, just like I remembered. But then something happened I didn't expect. At 2:04, the figure moved. Slowly, deliberately. He started walking toward the house. My breath caught. I kept watching. Step after step, he crossed the backyard. Quietly, calmly. Then, he disappeared from the frame. I paused the tape. He was at the wall, below the window. I rewound and played it again. I hadn't imagined it. He had moved. On his own. I kept watching, heart pounding. At 2:06, something climbed into frame. Through the bottom corner of the video, a hand came up. Then another. Then a head. He was climbing up the side of the house. I started shaking. At 2:07, his head reached the window. My window. The figure looked straight into the lens. I could see part of the face now. Pale. Eyes too wide. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. He just watched. Then he ducked out of view. The camera didn't catch him again. But I watched myself, 11-year-old me, sleeping. Peaceful. Oblivious. And behind me, in the darkness of my own room, I thought I saw a shift. A shadow. The camera kept rolling. But nothing else happened. No attack. No scream. Just me, turning once in bed, pulling the blanket up, and the shape in the corner, slowly settling down, like it had been there before. I deleted the footage, not because I was afraid someone would see it, but because I couldn't bear to watch it again. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't even tell my friends. That night, I started sleeping with the lights on. I begged my dad to nail the window shut. He thought it was a phase. He went along with it. I didn't care. I just wanted that window sealed. Weeks passed. I never saw the figure again. But I started noticing something else. Little things out of place. My desk chair would be pulled back when I was sure I pushed it in. The closet door would be cracked open, even though I always kept it shut. My socks went missing, only the left ones. Once, I woke up and my bed had been turned. It used to face the door. Now it faced the wall. My parents didn't believe me. They said I must have done it in my sleep, but I remember how heavy that bed was, and I remember the dream I had that night, of someone standing beside me, whispering, turn it so I can see you better." Years passed. I moved out, left that house behind, but sometimes when I wake in the middle of the night, not 2:03, but close, I swear I feel a presence in the room. Not threatening, just watching, and I wonder if he ever really left, or if once you've been seen, truly seen, he just waits for a new window, in a new place, at a new time, and if one night, when I'm too tired to notice, he might climb in, again. Still awake? Then maybe you're ready for more. Subscribe to NeuroNightmares if you want the kind of truths that don't let you sleep.